Pinellas County School Board is responsible for the administration of the county schools in accordance with state law and the rules of the State Board of Education. The board adopts policies that give the district direction to set priorities and to achieve its goals. The board also adopts and oversees the annual budget, hires and evaluates the superintendent, and manages the collective bargaining process for employees in the district. The board consists of 7 members, 3 who are elected at large, which means they are voted on by all county residents, and 4 who are elected by registered voters within single member districts. The school board term is 4 years, and the salary for a school board member is $44,531. And District 1 is an at-large district. So let's welcome our school board candidates for District 1, Laura Hine and Tom Topping. We will begin the evening giving each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and we will start with candidate Hine. Candidate Hine, you may begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. I am Laura Hine. It's good to be with you. I live and work in St. Petersburg with 2 young children in our public schools. I grew up in Tampa, went to public schools for K through 12, as well as through a master's degree. I came alive to today's issues in public schools more than 5 years ago when my son was coming of age for school, and I was awakened to the gross inequities in educational opportunities for children. The fact that a child would have to win a lottery or a voucher to have a chance at an excellent education seemed radically incorrect to me. And as a veteran who does not turn away at the sign of challenge, I decided to get involved. We chose to send our children to our zone public school, which was a Title I letter grade D school. I started a nonprofit to bring community awareness and support, and then I became president of our PTA, accomplishing a great deal with a great team of teachers and parents. I learned from the teachers and parents at our school from Academy Prep. I've met Jeffrey Canada with Harlem Children's Zone. I've studied the KIPP Academy's successes in Denver Public Schools. I've engaged with Foundation for Healthy St. Petersburg on their equity work with our school district, our legislators. I've been to Tallahassee on education. I read the books, I read the studies, and in 5 years, I've learned a great deal. From this, what I believe we must do is drive for equity and excellence in all of our schools, not just some of our schools, eliminating the achievement gap in the school to prison pipeline for our Black and brown students is a must, and providing the top level of academic experience at all ages. We must trust, value, inspire, and liberate our teachers, shifting from the anesthetizing database mindset to an awakened whole child strengths-based mindset. And we must know and make effective our $1.5 billion in taxpayer resources and advocate for additional and different resources that we might need in each of our schools. I look forward to our time together this evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Candidate Topping.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Yes, I'm Tom Topping. I'm your candidate for Pinellas County School Board District 1 at large. You might be asking yourself, why Tom? Why would you be a good choice for school board? Well, when I grew up, I always wanted to be a teacher and a coach. Well, if I'm completely truthful, I wanted to play in the NBA. But that wasn't in the cards. So I jumped at the chance to go to college and earn a bachelor's degree in secondary education. I was very proud of the fact that I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. After graduation, I spent 23 years in public education, 16 right here in Pinellas, as a teacher, coach, and district administrator. I taught in dropout prevention and ESE. I taught in elementary, middle, and high school. As a teacher, I've pretty much seen it all. I've worked the long hours, been to the IEP and parent meetings, graded the papers, written the lesson plans, but those are just some of the things that I've done as a teacher. You know, I believe in providing an equitable world-class education for all of Pinellas County students, one that will truly prepare them for college, career, and life. I'm committed to ensuring equity, access, and choice for every student across the district, particularly in communities that have been historically marginalized. I'm a firm advocate for safe and healthy schools, bridging the achievement gap, and putting parents, students, and teachers first. I believe we need to reimagine policing in our schools that will help to end the school to prison pipeline, I've seen all too often instances where we've called the deputy for a student that won't take their hat off or for sleeping in class. These issues can and should be handled by a skilled and trusted teacher. I believe we need to double down on our efforts to improve cultural competence, increase training on restorative practices, and ensure an anti-racist curriculum, as well as culturally relevant instruction. I believe I'm uniquely qualified for a seat on this board based on my experience and education. Yet I even mentioned the fact that I've run 2 nonprofits and started my own business. I'm prepared and eager to help this district face the unprecedented challenge of a post-COVID-19 educational system, one that's desperately in need of modernization by providing Wi-Fi access and computers to those who can't afford it. I'm ready to give back to the profession that has given so much to me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So let's start with our first question. And our first response will go to candidate Hine, and you will have 3 minutes. Pinellas County schools have long been plagued with alarming achievement gap between African American and white students. How do you propose addressing this problem?
Yes, we have been long plagued with that problem. And what I would say is that the next 100 years in America will be what we make it. And what we must do for a proud and thriving tomorrow is to cultivate and unleash the innate capabilities of our Black and brown children the way we have our white children. And education is the cornerstone of this possibility. There's a direct line correlation in between race and school grade, and we will move the needle by identifying and ameliorating impacts of socioeconomic issues as well as the systemic inequities in our society. We have our Bridging the Gap plan, yes, and it is focusing on several vital things. It's got access to advanced coursework. There's a gross disparity there, a gross disparity in our student discipline issues, the number of referrals, the number of out-of-school suspensions, the disparity in ESE identification, and then also we need to do better in our minority hiring and retention. All of those things are in the Bridging the Gap plan and are being measured and tracked. We have to do better on those, but I also think that we have to do a few things further. So I believe early childhood education is a significant place for improvement. Many studies demonstrate that the achievement gap is recognizable by 5 years old. There's a 2019 Georgetown University study called Born to Win, Schooled to Lose that demonstrates by kindergarten there was already a significant gap. We have to do better with early childhood education. I also think that racial bias training throughout our schools is crucial. I am encouraged by the work that Hillary Van Dyke is doing in our school system, working on the conscious and unconscious bias training. They have trained about 1,000 people and have about 400 certified equity champions. We need more. We need to invest and require this training for everyone. We absolutely have to address the school to prison pipeline. It is a criminal justice injustice and must be acknowledged and addressed. I see it, I care about it, I have read work on it. The Bridging the Gap plan does some work, but I also think, again, the additional work on racial bias, the lack of culturally inclusive material and experiences, the role of the police in our schools, access for all families, and the disproportionate of assigning of the behavioral and learning and challenges. This is a significant area, and I am committed to listening, learning, and doing the work to impact our achievement gap in Pinellas County.
Thank you. Mr. Topping.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephanie. When I think about the achievement gap and how long we've been working to close that gap, I'm reminded of the late Representative John Lewis, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, and his speech during the March on Washington in 1963, when he said, "We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now." And I feel the same way about the achievement gap. We need to close the gap for good. We need to close it right now. That we know what it takes. We can focus on it, but we need to close it now for good. You know, I actually worked on the Bridging the Gap team back in 2016 when I worked for Pinellas County Schools and I was a member of professional development. So we need to continue that work, but we need to train our teachers and our support staff and challenge them to help every child achieve greatness while we continue to do what the GAP intended to reduce suspensions and ESC placements for Black students, increase not just participation in accelerated courses and things like gifted, but performance and achievement in those classes need to improve. We need to increase grade level proficiency and graduation rates while continuing to find creative and unique ways to recruit and retain teachers. My HR background tells me that there's a lot of things we could be doing to recruit and retain teachers that we're not necessarily doing right now. Those are all great. The Bridging the Gap plan is a good start, but there are a few more key pieces that are involved in actually closing the gap for good. We need mentors. We need mentors for students and mentors for teachers, in particular, early career teachers, first-year teachers. Mentors can make all the difference. We know how well mentors can work in the business community. When implemented correctly, they can also work in our school. Early learning education to tackle literacies at an early age. You know, literacy is really a predictor of success, how successful we'll be. We can't wait until children are 8 or 9 years old and then attack that issue. It has to happen at a much earlier age, in pre-K. We need to increase culturally relevant instruction, right? We know that people will learn with much more interest when the subject matter is of interest to them, which is why project-based learning works as well. When you're given the opportunity to work on something that interests you, you're far more engaged in that work. So we need to increase relevant, culturally relevant instruction. And then ending the school to prison pipeline is absolutely something that needs to happen if we are going to close the gap. You know, the United States has 5% of the world's population and 20% of its incarcerated individuals. And that, sadly, that number starts all too often in our schools. We need to end that, and we need to end it now. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'd like to stay in this space. You both gave some pretty exhaustive reasons for the issue. I'd like to ask about community. How would you work to get community participation on the input into our schools? And this will be a 2-minute answer, and I will start with you, Mr. Hines.
Mr. Topping?
Mr. Topping, I'm
yes,
sorry.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. Thank you, Stephanie. No worries. Yeah. So community is everything when it comes to engaging our students, right? So when we're talking about bringing together, for instance, the Dr. Carter Woodson African American Museum, the professionals, and Dr. Lipsy Scott, and you know, bringing churches, bringing professionals that understand the community together to help solve these problems. They're not you know, completed in a vacuum, right? When I talk about mentors, adding mentors, and when I talk about early learning and literacy, we have to partner with our community to ensure that we have mentors that kids can trust and look up to, and that adults can trust and look up to, and go to for strength and encouragement. We definitely have to involve the community, because you know, I almost go back to the idea of culturally relevant instruction. If the community is involved and people are involved, I remember when I was a student, you know, our families were very involved in my school, and that helped from a standpoint of everyone was in it together. Everyone was building bridges towards education together. You know, we know that when there's a adult in a student's life, when there's an adult in a student's life, a caring adult, that student has a much better chance to be successful in their education. And so it's bridging those gaps as well, bringing the community together with our students and saying, these are partnerships. All too often, teachers sometimes are a little concerned about making a phone call home. We should be encouraging those phone calls home. We should be encouraging that partnership, because communication always makes things better. And communicating with the community will do that as well. Thanks.
Mrs. Hyde. Your speaker.
Thank you. You would think we'd be really good at that by now. Forgive me. Thank you for asking about community, excuse me. I think it is the most vital thing. And actually, when I was getting involved with our local school and we worked together as a board in a strategic session to come up with our mission, the number one tenet of our mission was to ignite, build, and strengthen community and school pride among all parents, teachers, and students, because we really believe that that was the most important way to get people together and talk and hear. Because, one of the things that I'm hopeful for, should I be successful in this election, one of the first things that I hope to do is set up roundtables across the county to meet, know, and hear from a range of families and school community members. We've done so much talking for a couple of months now, and I have a great deal of experience and ideas, yes, and I am ready to listen. That has been one of my favorite things over the last handful of years. I'm not the one with the answers. The people in the community are the ones with the answers, and the people who have done this work, who have been successful at this work, spending time at places and understanding what will work, because we can do it. We have to connect, and we have to talk, and we have to discover what those programs are, what the resources are, and then determine if we have the will to actually make it happen. So when it comes to community, that is to me one of the most important things. Some of the things we did, and each school has to kind of figure it out for itself. So I don't want to go too much into that. I see that I'm almost out of time. So each school is going to develop its community, but as a district and someone who would be a district-wide school board member, I very much look forward to meeting with, talking with, hearing from, and collaborating with our community members.
Thank you. Our next question, recognizing that this is the season of COVID-19 and the ongoing discussions regarding students returning physically to the classroom, what is your position and what would be your input regarding the reopening of Pinellas County Schools? You have 2 minutes, and we will start with Mrs. Hahn.
So my top 3 considerations, and as a reminder, I have 2 young children in school. I have a 1st grader and a 4th grader about to start. So my top 3 considerations around COVID are health, learning, and funding. So on health, we must watch the numbers. We must make our decisions first and foremost on health. On learning, we must provide the top instruction we can despite this interrupted environment that we know is best for learning. We have to equip our teachers, our families, meet students where they are, determine needs, and be agile enough to exceed those needs. On funding, I am very concerned about the future significant impact on state funding. While yes, this year they have affirmed our funding, I'm concerned about those future years and what kinds of trade-offs and decisions will have to be made. If I were on the board today, if I were to vote today, the cases have been on the rise. And based on that first concern of health, I would vote for our first quarter being 100% virtual, using this 2-week delay, which I agree with, for the purposes of allowing additional training and readiness of our teachers, as well as equipping our students and families to be as prepared as possible to provide the most rigorous academic experience. Learning loss is real. Learning loss is real. It is significant. It is already significant from having our schools closed in March, and we will have to continue to address that. If we would commit to it, then we could make it even better. So that's where I stand right now today. Health, learning, funding.
Thank you, Mr. Topping.
Right, thank you. Yes, my answer may sound a little bit like Laura's, but I can assure you I've been saying this since I started my campaign for school board. But our schools need to be a safe haven for our students, right? Our districts were put in a tough position when required to open by the governor. First, I have to say that I'm as connected to this issue as anyone. My wife, Michelle, she works for Pinellas County Schools. She's the director for Educational Alternative Services. So she goes to the district office every day. So my health is directly related to her health. Her health is directly related to the humans and individuals that go to work every day in the school board building. So I'm in this with everyone else. For the most part, I think the adults at the school district office do a pretty good job wearing masks and social distancing. But that game is going to change on the 13th when all of the 10-month employees return, and then on the 24th when students start to come back. So what would my input be? Unequivocally, while cases are spiking like they are right now, we can't open schools. We can open, but if we do, we should expect cases of COVID-19 to rise in Pinellas County at large. We should be prepared for school closures. We should be prepared for infections in our students and staff, and sadly, we should be prepared to hear some tragic stories. We need to be especially concerned with our Black and Brown students and families, as they're proving to be the most vulnerable community when it comes to this. So I agree as well in delaying so that we can prepare to train our teachers and also our buildings. But at the same time, we're pushing that date unintentionally closer to the start of flu season. And that brings in another piece of the equation, the risk of having the flu and COVID at the same time. So my input would be we can't start in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can start in person. We are schooling at home. As a school board member, how would you ensure that there's an equitable learning experience at home for all of our students in Pinellas County?
You're coming to me first, Stephanie, I'm assuming?
And it's a 3-minute answer.
And are you coming to me first, Stephanie? Okay, all right, great, thanks. Yeah, so equal would be providing Canvas and some learning opportunity to every student through online throughout the district. Equitable would be ensuring that every student has access to the online learning as it stands. So on my website, if you go to electontopping.com, you can see one of my priorities is equity and access for all students. And in this case, it means, yes, we can provide Canvas, we can provide these resources, but at the end of the day, they have to be accessible by every student. So that means every student needs a computer and every student needs internet access. We know currently that that is not the case in Pinellas County schools, and it is a reason why, when we went online in March, our poorer communities and our students with disabilities did not fare as well as our more affluent students did. So we need to ensure that everyone has computers. The district did a great job of using federal CARES grant money to buy 41,000 laptop computers so that we can close the gap and provide one-to-one computer access to all students. That's number one, that's a good thing. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of being prepared to go all online, we need to right now know whether or not we have enough computers for all of our students. The second thing that we need to do is ensure that there's equitable internet connections. You know, I mentioned my wife earlier. You know, she and I drove to some student homes back in March and delivered Wi-Fi hotspots to students that didn't have internet connections. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes we had to go back and pick them up, bring them in, took a day to get one back over. That's lost learning time. We need to ensure that spectrum, we need to ensure that cities, we need to be working right now with our communities to ensure that there's Wi-Fi access, whether it's free, whether Spectrum continues the contract for new families that need online learning, to ensure that they have access to the internet, because that's going to be a game changer. We could deliver a brand new laptop to someone, but if they don't have internet connection, and I'm not talking about, oh, use your phone as a hotspot or something like that. That's not good enough. We need to make sure that the district provides internet access and computers to everyone so that they have an equal chance of being successful, or should I say an equitable chance of being as successful as everyone else across the district. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Hine.
So hardware and connection, yes, right? Those are kind of those physical assets that are needed. We have to provide computers, we have to provide wireless, and there are people who are logistically totally focused on providing these hardware pieces and making them happen. And it happened to a great extent in the spring, and I think it'll happen to a much greater extent in the fall, now that they've had the summer to even further figure it out. But what about the other parts, right? So what about the part where I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old at home who are supposed to go through this online learning, and it takes someone who's sitting there, who's doing it with them. My husband and I both work. We are a dual working household, and there are plenty of those in this community, and it is difficult. We are very fortunate to be at places in our careers where we have flexibility and we can trade off and on and those kinds of things. Not everybody has that. So there are a lot of impacts to learning losses. Yes, we have to solve computers and wireless, and that's logistics, and we can do that. That's hardware. But how do we get the people in the lives to make sure that these students are logging on, have the questions to their assignments done. And then once you have your assignment, you have to take a picture of it and upload it. And I mean, it's not like you put on some headphones and your 7 or 8-year-old's just gonna be in school for 6 hours. It is not easy. So what do we do about that? And I know that teachers are calling directly each student's home, whoever has not gotten online, whoever had not logged in, and they're coming up with more and more ways to address that. And I believe as a community, and each community can work together in figuring this out. I was talking with the YMCA the other day, asking David Jezik, hey, what are you guys doing? Will you have places still open? What if we do close brick and mortar and people need places for their kids? I also called the Juvenile Welfare Board to talk with them about what are their resources, what are their assets, what could we be doing with the community centers. I think that PTAs, schools that are fortunate enough to have really active, engaged PTAs like ours who are delivering food to families that are in need over the summer, and a whole range of things, asking what they need, but going to the schools and figuring out one by one on a family by family basis what those families need to help make their students successful is going to be the key. And we have a number, the Pinellas Education Foundation, again, the Juvenile Welfare Board, who else? But we can harness our community resources, we can harness our businesses, we can harness our volunteers and people to meet these needs and try to ameliorate the impacts of these virtual learning losses, because it's certainly real.
Thank you. We're going to go to a question from the audience. And this will be a 3-minute answer, and we'll start with Mrs. Hines. Do you support a budget equity formula that allocates to schools and programs based on the data-supported need, including accounting for donations by community in the equity formula, so schools in less affluent communities receive more funding?
That's a really interesting idea, and I would love to talk more about that, yes. You know what it sounds a lot like? It sounds a lot like what the state does when they are developing funding, right? They have a multiplier that's a county by county multiplier that kind of does something similarly, so that a county that has a much higher tax levels, then with this multiplier, each county is assigned one. And so there are actually different levels of resources depending on that county's availability of resources, if you will. I'm not sure that I explained that super well. So there is already a multiplier, and I've been up to Tallahassee and sat in on hearings and listened to people actually trying to advocate to do away with that multiplier, which I think would be a significant problem. So that's happening there, but I think that's a really interesting idea here. So what I would say to you is I haven't seen the formula and I don't know what's in and out of it. And as somebody who studied aerospace engineering as my undergraduate degree, and I have an MBA in finance, and I'm sort of that mindset. I love to look at formulas, and I enjoy, and I think it's valid, and we have to talk about what do we value. And in a capitalistic society, what it tends to follow, what we fund is what we value. And so this is something that I would be very interested in learning more and learning more about, some kind of equity funding profile like that. It's interesting.
Mr. Topping.
Sorry about that. You're right, Laura. You would think we were really good at that. Yes, I would definitely support that for sure. We need equitable funding because money matters when it comes to student achievement. Evidence shows that increased spending on education will lead to better student outcomes, right? When we invest in our public schools and we create more equitable school financial systems, student achievement will rise. And there's positive effects of that as a result. Cutting funding or taking a view of funding in a different way is short-sighted. I mean, you can't look at funding as just equal. This school has this many students. We get funding for teaching units based on students that are enrolled. Right, so it's called you have a teaching unit, and you get a certain amount of money for that student that's enrolled, and then you can use that money to allocate those resources. So, we have to make sure that money is allocated to the communities and to the schools that need it, so that they have an equitable opportunity to achieve. Because again, students in high poverty communities continue to have less access to core academic services, and that will obviously increase student achievement. And we as a district play a role in that, right? The budget for Pinellas County Schools this year is around $1.6 billion. That sounds like a ton of money, but when you parse out that 80 to 83% of that budget goes to just employee salary and benefits, then that leaves you about $300 million for everything else, outside of grants and all the things that you can apply for. But state funding and things like that leaves about $300 million. So now you have a much smaller pie that the focus needs to be on, well, what's going to make what's going to help the needs? What's going to bring down the barriers? What's going to actually knock down the challenges that face students that have been marginalized in the past, and communities that have faced those barriers in the past? And that's what is required when we talk about equitable funding in education. It's recognizing that, understanding that, and then being able to put those pieces into place that will help achieve the outcomes that we want for all of our students. So yes, not only would I agree with it, I think that is my philosophy as well.
Thank you. Our next question, and you will have 2 minutes to answer, and we'll start with you, Mr. Topping. What are your views on gifted testing in kindergarten as it relates to the achievement gap?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think, like I said earlier, the achievement gap can be closed when we're focusing on education at an early age. We have lots of things in place to catch kids up and to help them graduate on the back end, but we're losing kids along the way. And one of the biggest things we can do is ensure that our kids from an early age can have those opportunities at advanced learning and can be identified at an early age. When you think about gifted, I look at it as a coach. I'm a coach, and gifted is kind of like the all-star team. The all-star team a lot of times gets the best coaches. Gifted gets the best teachers. Brand new teacher coming into the school typically doesn't get the gifted class. That's the way it works. Usually one of the better teachers. So the best students already get the best teachers. So we need to look at that model a little bit differently. We need to look from a broader spectrum and a broader approach and a broader scope to say, yes, we can test kids early to help determine levels of literacy and math proficiency and things like that. But at the end of the day, we need to be doing that so that we're not playing catch up 3 years later in third grade when we finally take a test and we say, okay, these kids need special help and whatnot. So understanding that. Broadening the idea of gifted and increasing that opportunity is good, but from the standpoint of that we also need to provide excellent education for all of our students and not just those kids towards gifted, because I'm afraid a lot of times that scenario that I played out earlier is what happens. But opening up those opportunities, that's a really, really good idea.
Mrs. Hine.
So the question was about testing kindergartners for the gifted program. So access to advanced coursework is one of the identified areas in our Bridging the Gap plan, that there is a racial disparity when it comes to access to advanced coursework. When I got really involved a handful of years ago, and I was asking our teachers and administrators, what are some of the things that you would like what are some of the things that you would like to do at our school that maybe parents and volunteers can help you do? And there was a whole range of things. One of them said, we need a preschool. We are one of only 2 elementary schools in the entire county that didn't have a preschool. Now that has taken almost 4 or 5 years, but we are getting a preschool. And she said, I have too many kids who have not experienced any kind of school at all. So I've got this range as soon as the first day of kindergarten happens. So also along that listening line of saying, what is it that is needed? One of the things that was also brought up was exactly this idea. They asked, could you support funding for all of our kindergartners to be tested for gifted so that we make sure that we don't have this kind of gap at our school? And so, yes, we did that. And, it's interesting. We've talked about it over the last couple of years. Has it or hasn't been successful? It has identified several students that would not have otherwise been identified. At the same time, we wonder if it's too young. We wonder if first grade might be better because, again, access to early childhood education. If they haven't had that access to early childhood education, give them a year in kindergarten or so. I just had a son who just finished kindergarten, and he was nowhere near ready to be taking advanced coursework type of test at all. He was, just still doing the things that a 4- and 5-year-old does. So one, I think, yes, we need access to advanced coursework for all students. Figuring out what that right age is, I think is the appropriate thing, but access to advanced coursework for all students across ages.
Thank you. We have some great questions coming in for the audience. So we're going to go with the 2-minute questions moving forward so we can get in as many as possible. So our next question, we'll start with you, Mrs. Hine. For Black and Brown faculty, or that, how do they become a part of the teaching staff? What strategies might you suggest for faculty that are interested in becoming part of the teaching staff?
Do you mean for minority hiring?
Correct.
Because if they're faculty, it sounds like they're already part of the teaching staff.
Employees that are not part of the teaching staff.
Good. Well, so minority hiring and retention is something that we absolutely have to do better. 18% of our students are Black, and only 8% of our professional instructional corps is Black. And I think it matters. I think it matters who you see standing in front of your classroom. And who you see around the school environment. And so I do think that I do think that this is a priority, yes, and we need to make clear. I mean, the first thing we need to do for all of our employees who might be interested is make clear, here are the steps, here are the ways that you become a certified teacher, and let them believe that it's possible, and give them the time and the availability and the support needed to take the steps to become a certified teacher if it's something that they're really interested in. But I absolutely believe that increasing our number of minority teachers, of Black and brown teachers, has to be a priority. And, you know, this is something that a number of workplaces are facing. Certainly it's critical in education. Even here at the organization that I'm in, we are certainly taking a hard look at our diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, at our own hiring practices, at the makeup of our staff. So this is something that across the board has to be taken a look at, and, you know, certainly in our classrooms.
Mr. Topping?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. You have Black and brown staff working for Pinellas County Schools that have an interest in becoming educators.
Gotcha.
What strategies might you recommend to increase the number of staff that can become educators?
Gotcha. Great. Thank you. Yes. So, I actually did that work when I was in Pasco County Schools working as a human capital partner. So we would actually work with our schools to take teachers that were interested, or to take support staff that were interested in becoming teachers. And we actually had job fairs. We had kind of like back to school nights where we invited support staff to come and learn about how to become a teacher. We had our folks from certification there that provided the information on becoming a teacher, on you know, do you have a degree, and can you pass the test and get certified that way, or would you come in and transition to teaching through a different avenue? But you do have to focus on bringing in more Black and brown teachers. There's no doubt. So it's targeted in that way. You know, there's a teacher shortage across the board. So you should always be looking from within your organization. You know, part of the reason why there's only 8%, you know, our Bradley law requires an equal number of Black teachers and Black administrators based on the Black population. So part of the issue that we have is a lot of our Black teachers become Black administrators. And so we're constantly having to fill that. So again, that should cascade down to support staff, encouraging and helping support staff and bringing down barriers to help them either earn degrees, become certified, or just understand the path and the opportunity. You know, people thrive in a workplace environment when they have a future, when they see a future. And that for many people can be moving from support staff to teacher. And so that's what I would do. I would recruit from within, having some job fairs and things like that.
Thank you. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act allows the arming of personnel in our schools. Do you support this? And if so, why? And I will start with you, Mr. Topping.
Thank you, Stephanie. So this is something that I've been passionate about for a long, long time. In particular, right after the Stoneman Douglas mass shooting, and when our some political leaders started talking about arming teachers. And I have been absolutely against this idea from the beginning. In fact, when I launched my campaign, I put on my website, one of my priorities was safer schools. And I talked about the idea of arming teachers is a very bad idea and one that I wouldn't support. I talked about on my website the impact that lockdown drills have psychologically on our students. And no, I am absolutely 100% against the idea of arming teachers. I do not believe that more guns equal more safe. I'm not against the Second Amendment, but I am 100% against teachers carrying firearms, and I always will be. You won't be able to convince me otherwise. But I will listen to people, but that's a very, very strong stance that I have and that I've taken from the beginning. And maybe even, that may not be very popular with some folks, but it's right. I believe it's right. And for me, it's the right stance to take. And I've taken it since day one. We need to look at this problem with a broader lens than just that. So why are we even considering, this idea of arming teachers? We need to look at hardening our schools. We need to look at communication. We need to look at reimagining police so the police are trusted. We need to build trust in our students. We need to build trust in our staff. We need to connect those bridges and communication. And we need to make sure that these types of incidences are stopped before they ever begin, not with a teacher bringing a gun to try to attempt them once they've already begun.
Mrs. Hine.
Thank you for raising the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Commission. So I don't know if people are aware, but that Safety Commission was made up primarily of sheriffs and police officers. There were maybe one mental health professional on that commission. And when that commission came out, one of the first things I did was contact all of my legislators about balancing the commission. I talked to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and their CEO volunteered to be on that commission, and it never went anywhere. So when their recommendations came out, I was immediately involved. As a parent with young children in the public schools, I contacted all of our legislators. I encouraged everyone to do the same, researched, advocated. I connected with the Pinellas County Schools Safety and Security Administrator, and I asked, how is our district interpreting and responding to this legislation? What's it going to look like in our schools? I also reached out to the head of pediatric neuroscience at the All Children's Hospital to ask about the potential impacts of these monthly drills and videos on all ages of children. I shared what I learned with our school administration, and I was ultimately successful in conveying the potential damage and preventing the videos from being shown in our elementary school, as well as getting age-appropriate guidance to families. On the topic of arming teachers, I believe the only person who should have a weapon in a school setting is a licensed and trained professional for whom crisis response is his or her primary responsibility. As a former military officer, I was trained in firearms, and I know firsthand the responsibilities that come with carrying them. When it comes to violence in schools, I believe that what we must focus on is the initial choice of people, typically adolescents in school shootings, wanting to harm others, and ensure that we are creating the kind of environment, providing the kinds of health and guidance services needed to ameliorate this impulse. Adolescent anxiety, depression, suicide have been on the rise for more than a decade. And after reading the research and talking with professionals, I believe that monthly drills and additional weapons in the school setting only contribute to declining mental health.
Thank you. This will be our last question before we go to your closing remarks. So we'll start with you, Mrs. Hine, and this is 2-minute answer. The District 7 school board seat was primarily designed at a minimum for African American representation. It's being sought out by a non-Black candidate with vast name recognition.
Yeah.
What is your view and response to the need for racial and cultural diversity on the Pinellas County School Board, understanding many complexities and historical challenges relative to the African American achievement gaps? Specifically, what are your thoughts with regards to this decision making for a diverse school population by the potential of an all-white school board?
So as I said earlier, I think it matters. I think it matters to have the actual diversity at all levels, and I think it matters on our school board. I have lived in this city for a long time, and I'm aware of Carl Nurse. I actually lived in his city council district for a period of time. I don't anymore. but I still live in District 7. I'm a voter in District 7 for school board, and I know that he's done great work, and I know he cares intensely and is engaged, but I do think it matters. And so I personally, I believe that the people will, and I believe that it's important that we do have an African American or Black person on our school board.
Thank you, Mr. Topping.
Yes, I agree. We need a diverse school board. There's no question. You need diversity. You need diversity in every area of business. Diversity ensures that every voice is heard. Diversity ensures that as a board, you can function to meet the needs of the entire community. You know, our District 1 is everyone from South St. Petersburg to Tarpon Springs. We have to listen to the needs of everyone. District 7 has its own certain population as well that they're going to represent on that board. And Renee Flowers has done a tremendous job of supporting and serving that district for years. You know Renee, and I think that it is critical. I don't know Carl Nurse. I know his name. I know some of the other candidates. I know that there are some fine choices there, and I would like to see a diverse Pinellas County School Board, but I can ensure that if elected, I would be a sounding board for many of those same communities, and have a sense of what's needed in those places as well, because that if there isn't a Black representative on the board, there can be Black representation through the board. And so, yes, I think it is incredibly important. But at the end of the day, there's, I don't want to say we shall overcome, but there will be representation there to ensure that the needs of everyone in District 7 are met. But kudos to Renee and her experience in that role.
Thank you. And now our candidates will provide their closing statements. We'll start for 2 minutes with you, Mr. Topping.
All right. So thank you very much. So I'm passionate about kids and learning. I've had the education, experience, vision, and executive presence to be ready on day one. There'll be no learning curve when implementing my vision of guaranteeing equity and access for all students, closing the achievement gap for good, ensuring excellent teaching in a post-COVID-19 educational system, and protecting the health and safety of all stakeholders. I recognize that budgeting and policymaking can change lives and provide opportunities for all of Pinellas County's children. I'd like you to remind you of my experience because I believe it matters. Right out of college, I was hired as a Division I assistant basketball coach. I went on to become a successful high school varsity basketball coach and was the head coach at Dixie Hollins and Seminole High School. I spent 15 years as a consultant with Nike in the grassroots basketball division. I'm proud of the 120 players who received full scholarships. That's worth an estimated value of $15 million. And I can't forget that I also served as a Special Olympics coach as well. As an administrator, I've been a champion for supporting students and teachers. I didn't take the traditional route toward educational leadership. I didn't seek to earn a master's in ed leadership and become an AP or principal and have an impact on student achievement in one school. I wanted to work at the district level, just like now, and have an impact in every school. I'm proud of my accomplishments over those 23 years. Here's some of the things that I've done as an administrator. I reduced opening day teaching vacancies from over 200 in 2015 to fewer than 90 in 2017. I condensed the time to hire substitutes from 2.5 months to 2 weeks. I increased the total number of substitutes in one district from 600 to 1,400 in 2 years, while simultaneously increasing their pay and hiring requirements. I train thousands of teachers and administrators on best practices and teaching strategies because I know what great teaching looks like. I train principals and assistant principals on how to identify great teaching and coach them on giving feedback to teachers that inspires them to grow their practice. I served as a professional development liaison on the Bridging the Gap plan. I worked closely on that plan to ensure that we had adequate training and excellent mentoring opportunities for our teachers in the toughest schools. I want to thank you very much, Marielle and Stephanie and Dr. Scott. Last thing I'll say, my campaign slogan for Pinellas County Schools is "Let's get to the future first." And that is exactly what we'll do when you elect me on August 18th. Thank you very much.
I intend to do is set up these roundtables across the county to meet, listen, and hear from a range of people. Again, we've done a lot of talking, and I have a great deal of experience, and I have a great number of ideas, yes, but I am ready to listen. You know, and I want to listen to all people. As a veteran, I might mention that the Article 1 of the Code of Conduct for the U.S. Armed Forces is, I am an American, fighting in the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I am prepared to give my life in their defense. Prepared to give my life in their defense. And I am an American. So when we serve all people, all Americans, not just those who look like me, talk like me, marry like me, pray like me, all Americans. And that will always be the lens through which I serve in any way within our community and within my own life. Public schools affect us all. The children that are in our schools today are the families, communities, workforce of tomorrow, and strong public education is vital to our communities, our economy, and to our democracy. If there are challenges in our schools or if there are opportunities to further excel, it's up to us to engage. As a parent with 2 young students in public schools, I've shown up. I've listened, I've worked, I've learned a great deal. I know and have advocated around the many issues of today, and I live them as a parent with my 2 young children in our schools. I'm committed to equity, access, and excellence in all of our schools. I'm committed to our teachers, committed to thriving teachers equal thriving classrooms, and I've shown that in my work, and it's why I'm endorsed by our Teachers Association. I'm committed to Pinellas County Schools shifting from this database mindset to a strengths-based whole child mindset that restores the love of teaching, the love of learning, and creating curiosity that lasts a lifetime. As a veteran, I've demonstrated my absolute commitment to public service. As an executive, which you can see my extensive experience, I have experience in large, complex systems as well as finances. And as a parent with 2 young children in our Pinellas schools now, I will not settle for less than excellence in all of our schools. Thank you for listening to me and to us tonight. I'm Laura Hine. I'm asking for your vote for Pinellas County School Board. Thank you. And please be in touch if you have any questions, comments, anything. Tom and I are both available through any means. I get the feeling from him, and I know from me that we both really enjoy talking with people. So certainly be in touch.
Thank you, candidate. Thank you for your willingness to serve our community. And now we'll have closing remarks from the Carter G. Woodson African American Museum Executive Director, Terry Lipsey Scott.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so very, very much for joining us this evening. What I'd like to say to you both, Laura Hine and Tom Topping, we're grateful. We're grateful for your willingness to serve, for your desire to make a difference in the lives of area youth. It is extremely important that we prepare, not only for today, but for tomorrow. What I've heard tonight gives me hope that we're on a path of making a difference in the lives of children in our Pinellas County school system. I would like to further state that it does my heart good that you took the time to share with this listening audience, opening yourselves up to the questions that have been put before you. We're grateful. To the both of you, whoever becomes the victor, I'm hopeful that the other one will certainly remain engaged and involved, still wanting and striving to make a difference in the lives of area youth here in Pinellas County. Thank you so much for being here. Stephanie Owens, thank you so much for being such a wonderful facilitator. We're grateful for your presence here this evening and for facilitating this extraordinary conversation. Moriel Summers, our staff, and our producer behind the scene, we thank you this evening. And to all of the viewers, we're extremely grateful for you taking time from your busy schedule to become that educated voter. We say to all of you, thank you so much for joining us, and please vote, vote, vote. You'll have a wonderful evening, and thank you.